The Sega Master System was released in 1985 to take on the might of the Nintendo Entertainment System. It was many a youngster's first experience of home gaming, especially over here in Europe, where the console earned a far greater market share than it did in America or its native Japan. In fact, if you're British and you cut your gaming teeth in the 80s or early 90s, a Master System with Alex Kidd in Miracle World built into it may well be your earliest gaming memory. If so, then we hope the vague recollections of terrifying hand-faced monstrosities forcing you to play rock, paper, scissors for your life aren't still keeping you up at night. Alex Kidd was no Super Mario, and the Master System definitely played second fiddle to the NES. As such, the system's back catalogue is comparatively lacking in quantity, but there's definitely some quality in there if you know where to look. There are a few Sonic the Hedgehog games that vary greatly from their better-known Mega Drive counterparts, certainly, but we're digging a bit deeper than that today. Yes, it's time to get the magnifying glass out and start squinting to find some of the hidden highlights of the Sega Mega Drive's precursor. Prepare for pixelated pleasure as we discuss 8-bit delights that might have escaped your notice, even if you're old enough to have been around back then. I'm Ben from TripleJump, and here are 10 hidden gems for the Sega Master System. Number 10. Psychic World. This telekinesis-powered platformer is a port of a game from the MSX2 called Psycho World. While the Master System didn't quite have the power of that computer, the port for Sega's console was well handled and provided a much more accessible platform on which to play the game. In Psychic World, you take on the role of Lucia, a young woman empowered with psychic abilities. Lucia heads out into a world inhabited by strange creatures in an attempt to save her twin sister Cecile from the psychic monsters who kidnapped her. Equipped with an ESP booster, Lucia is able to use various psychic abilities to defeat monsters and progress through tricky levels. Each of her skills is upgradable too, making for a nice sense of progression that takes this beyond your standard early platformer. There's an interesting little story that plays out in anime-style cutscenes between levels, starting out with an explosion in a laboratory dedicated to ESP research. Spoilers, the scientist who runs the lab is actually responsible for all the psychic monsters and kidnapping. Honestly, if you can't trust an older gentleman who runs an isolated lab and hires a pair of sisters as his only assistants, who can you trust? Number 9. Miracle Warriors: Seal of the Dark Lord. While this lovely 8-bit turn-based RPG did see release on the Famicom, the Master System port was the only one that made it west. Channeling the 80s Dungeons & Dragons vibe with a Japanese twist, Miracle Warriors: Seal of the Dark Lord allows players to explore a fantasy world and venture into the lair of Demon Queen Terrorin, showed in all her glory in the Japanese version's racy front cover. This brazen queen has unleashed hordes of foul creatures into the world. Players navigate using a map in the upper right of the screen, seeking out party members, finding treasures, and battling monsters as they go. The turn-based system is a little archaic, with players only able to choose one character to attack per turn, but it's still a fun game for those interested in the very early days of the genre. Its bright visuals and charming 8-bit tunes also add to that retro RPG feel that brings a wistful look to the eyes of creaky old gamers. Miracle Warriors also makes use of gratuitous oldie English-style dialogue in a way that we entirely approve of. After all, in what situation is "how can I help" better than "what dost ye desire of me"? None. There are no situations in which the former is more appropriate. Number 8. Aztec Adventure. A cutesy look at the cutthroat mercenary world of global treasure hunting, the Master System exclusive Aztec Adventure set players against NPC adventurers who are seeking paradise in a hostile land. Players must explore ruins, marshes, and other such environments, defeating enemies and collecting weapons to prepare for the tougher dangers ahead. Things get interesting, innovative, and even a little cynical when players encounter their fellow adventurers. These potential companions will act as enemies unless you ply them with gold. Offer them enough of the shiny stuff and they'll change allegiance and help you out on your quest. The more capable the adventurer, the more gold it'll take to tempt them over to your cause. And to top it all off, these unscrupulous mercenaries appear to take the form of happy little animal friends. The Japanese version of Aztec Adventure is called Nazca 88: The Golden Road to Paradise, and it focuses on the Nazca culture in Peru. Why change the name and setting to be Aztec related for the international release? We don't know. Maybe they worried that Americans might have thought it was a racing game. NASCAR? Nazca? Look, that's not even a joke, I'm just trying to make sense of things. Number 7. Fantasy Zone: The Maze. While not exactly mainstream, Sega's adorably bonkers Fantasy Zone series is definitely recognizable to shoot-'em-up fans of a certain age. However, this genre-shifted entry takes more cues from Pac-Man than it does from Scramble or Galaga, putting adorable sentient spaceship Opa Opa in a variety of mazes for our amusement. Fantasy Zone The Maze is a 1- or 2-player game with some nice elements that make it stand out a bit from other titles in this once crowded genre. Instead of Pac-Man's pips, Opa Opa is required to collect all of the coins to advance to the next level. However, the coins decrease with size over time, and as they get smaller, they decline in value, adding a sense of urgency for high score chasers. Opa Opa can also be upgraded by purchasing weapons during gameplay. This can be an empowering experience if you're used to the completely defenseless Pac-Man. I mean, I know the yellow fellow can power up and turn the tables on the lurking ghosties, but don't tell me it wouldn't be cathartic to vaporize Inky, Blinky, Pinky and Clyde from a distance for once. Number 6. Master of Darkness. While this gothic action platformer is probably the most well-known game we're going to talk about today, we do have good reason for including Master of Darkness on this list of hidden gems. Its complete lack of legacy when compared to the games it directly contended with. Master of Darkness is practically unheard of nowadays compared to a certain contemporary that did a lot of the same things. Stop me if you've heard this before. You explore eerie environments, battle zombies, bats and other creepy creatures, and pick up weapons that can be equipped to help you in your quest to face Count Dracula himself. That's right, Master of Darkness took on the might that is Castlevania, bringing the feel of the famous vampire-slaying series to Sega consoles before Konami's series ever made the jump. It wasn't just a bland rip-off either. Featuring atmospheric visuals, tight controls, large levels and a decent challenge, there's plenty of game here to lose yourself in. Master of Darkness is primarily set in London and features a winding story linking possessed girls, a villainous count, and even real-life Victorian-era murderer Jack the Ripper. It all leads to Transylvania in the end, though, for a climactic showdown with the man himself. You just can't keep a good vampire down, unless you've got a wooden stake or a crucifix, or garlic, or flowing water, or daylight, or a door. Come to think of it, there are a lot of ways to keep vampires down. Why does everyone seem to have such a difficult time of it? Number 5. Golvellius Valley of Doom. Back in those fabled Master System times, a number of now classic and prolific franchises were in their infancy. Castlevania wasn't the only one that Sega fans would be out of luck if they wanted to play. The Legend of Zelda was another. The NES sensation was a top-down adventure featuring a cool sword-wielding hero, cute but tough enemies, puzzles to solve, and treasures to find. Enter Golvellius Valley of Doom, featuring top-down overworld sections and side-scrolling dungeons in the vein of Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link. While the gameplay isn't quite as well crafted as Nintendo's Hyrulean Adventures, it offers a fun and meaty experience for Master System enthusiasts nonetheless, with a charming atmosphere and a bright, bold graphical style. It even got around the issue of lacking a save file by including a password system that enables you to start a game with all the handy gear found in previous attempts. That was a much appreciated anti-frustration feature. Oh, also, it's got more of that lovely gratuitous oldie English in it. Verily, 'tis quite the source of merriment. Number 4. Bomber Raid. While overhead shooters were everywhere in the 80s, not all of them worked too well on the 8-bit consoles, suffering from flickering and slowdown that hampered the experience. Activision's Bomber Raid, however, minimized such issues and looked very impressive for the era, featuring colorful battlefields and impressive bosses. However, while enjoyable, Bomber Raid is not a game to be taken lightly. One hit will take away all of your power-ups, making progression difficult if you don't have that pro-gamer skill. For those after a challenging top-down shooter they might not have played before though, this Master System exclusive could be the game for you. A word of warning, however, don't be fooled by the lying Western cover art. While players take control of a World War II-era propeller plane in-game, the cover shows what is clearly a Lockheed SR-71 Blackbird. Alright, I had to look up what the plane was called, but even an aircraft amateur like me can tell that that's way more modern than anything in the actual game, so it does lie to you, be aware. Number 3. Masters of Combat. While the Master System did see a port of Mortal Kombat and even Street Fighter II made it to the console via Brazilian manufacturer Tectoy, which is a whole story for another day, arguably the one-on-one fighter that made the most of the console's capabilities was the much more obscure Masters of Combat. Set in the near future, the introduction weaves a tale of a mysterious spaceship and a sudden and unexpected announcement of a fighting tournament by the untrustworthy-seeming mayor of Megalo City. Players choose from one of 4 characters and journey from location to location battling the city's toughest fighters. We especially like High Voltman. If ever there was squandered potential for a legendary fighting game character, here it is, right here, High Voltman. 4 fighters may not seem like a lot, but Masters of Combat gave Master System Fisticuffs fans a smooth and responsive combat experience with impressive animations and high-quality dynamic backgrounds that wouldn't look out of place on the Mega Drive. Also, there is actually a 5th character. It's the alien from the crashed spaceship. And the mayor is the alien. What a twist! Eat your heart out, M. Night Shyamalan. Number 2. Gangster Town. This Master System gem is set in America during the 1920s, an era of sharp suits, speakeasies, Tommy guns, prohibition, Al Capone, John Dillinger, gangster stuff. In Gangster Town, you play as a machine gun-toting FBI agent on a mission to clean up the streets, and someone must have ticked this guy off because he's taking no prisoners. And I don't mean that metaphorically either, there will be literally nobody left to arrest when he's finished. Take up your Sega Light Phaser, which is the Master System's light gun peripheral, and fill the streets with pixelated, pinstriped corpses as you rack up a historic kill count. As well as shooting gallery-style gameplay, there are also car chases and boss fights to enjoy. All of these allow for a second player too, if you can muster up another Light Phaser. The first level is a quick training exercise, and your performance here will affect the difficulty of the rest of the game, which is a nice touch. Also, in an unexpected supernatural twist, once you shoot a gangster, his little gangster ghost will float out of him. You can then shoot his ghost for a few extra points, although it just feels like adding spiritual insult to physical injury at that point. Number 1. Spellcaster. Wield magical powers and set out on an adventure through medieval Japan in this Master System masterpiece. Originally based on a manga called Kujaku Ou, which was an action horror about a Buddhist exorcist, Spellcaster was the Western reskin. Those responsible for localizing the game still put a fair bit of effort into the story though, and succeed in crafting an intriguing tale of mysterious attacks on villages and temples, as well as the revival of an ancient serpent god. A large portion of the game is dedicated to this story, with expansive cursor-controlled graphical adventure-style puzzles and interactions in which the players attempt to unravel the mysterious goings-on. This is a nice change of pace from the side-scrolling action and gives Spellcaster its own unique identity in the Master System library. There's even a bit of scrolling shooter action towards the end too. Less than a year after its release, Spellcaster received a sequel for the Mega Drive called Mystic Defender, which some say is a bit of a hidden gem in its own right. But we've only got room for 10 on this list, so better luck next time, Mystic Defender.